had, you know, in spite of the challenges throughout Michigan in with, you know, the lack of markets, with challenges for programs, with lack of infrastructure, investments continue to be made, progress continues to happen, and we have seen successes. So we thought it important to share with you some of the successes that have happened recently across the state. So we'll hear from 3 programs. Capital Area Recycling and Trash, or CART, is the City of Lansing's program, and they'll be talking about their recent effort to get a material recovery facility established here in the capital city. We'll hear from Theo Egermont with Washtenaw County about their process of doing a solid waste plan in the middle of all of this tumult over Part 115. And we'll also hear from Catherine Tesson from the Mid-Michigan Waste Authority about a significant contract renewal process that they went through recently. We hope that the highlighting of these successes will help to spur you on to take on the big things you need to take on. So first of all, Lori Welch from the City of Lansing.
Hey everybody, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. And I know many of you have heard little bits of our story, but we kind of have an exciting update, especially towards the end. But just to introduce myself briefly, I'm Lori Welch. I'm the Sustainability Manager for the City of Lansing. I've been with the city for over 20 years, up until recently overseeing the Recycling and Solid Waste Department. And so was very much involved in this journey that I'll talk about that involved many different people. I think I'm just the one who was like kind of a dog with a bone and wouldn't let go, even though this kind of has taken years and years and years. So I guess if anything, just know that sometimes it just takes a lot of patience and tenacity to get stuff done. But you all probably know that. So you can go ahead and forward the slide if you would, please. So just a very brief overview of Lansing's program. We have a fairly comprehensive system. We pick up residential trash, recycling yard waste, bulk collection, and we do commercial recycling that does include some multifamily. And you can go ahead and forward that. A little bit of history. We started our program back in the early 90s. It remained pretty much relatively the same until about 2010 when we went to single stream. At that point, we were still using bins. And in 2013, we finally made that transition from bins to carts. And we, at that time, also changed from weekly to a biweekly collection, which had a pretty significant impact on our tonnage and participation. And we do run our own municipal crews. There's a few of us that do that. It may not be the most common model, but that's how our program has always worked. We own and operate our own transfer station. And we have partnered with the City of East Lansing for the last few years. They also have their own municipal crews, and they just bring the material that they collect to our transfer station. We also accept materials from a couple of private haulers. And we just combine all of those materials together and put them in a compactor, which you can see on the bottom of the slide there. Our loader putting materials in there helps us get some more materials into each load. It's a little more efficient with a compactor. And we typically send about 5, 6, 7 loads every week to the MRF in Southfield, that the Rossack MRF operated by Republic. So that's our current system. We all together with the materials put through the transfer station are a little bit under 7,500 tons a year. And in Lansing, the last we calculated a year or so ago was about a 70% participation rate. And our diversion rate is about 34%. We have a lot of goals to grow recycling, particularly with the commercial and multifamily sector. We think that there's a lot of room for growth there. And for those of you who know me, you know that I'm passionate about regional partnerships, and that's been something that we have pursued a lot in the past and will continue to pursue. So really kind of the story here of how we got from where we were to now is back in 2014, and even predates that, you know, us recycling coordinators have known that this region can do a lot better with recycling. We've all kind of been disjointed in doing our own programs and shipping materials to different parts of the state. We didn't really have any regional collaboration. We knew we could do better. We just didn't know how. And in 2014, an opportunity presented itself through a grant opportunity, and it was called the CGAP grant through the Department of Treasury, which sadly is no longer available. But for us, it presented a great opportunity, and we used the funds that we got to conduct a feasibility study. RRS did that work for us, and it really involved a lot of data gathering, looking at the entire Tri-County region of Ingham, Eaton, Clinton counties, and looking at what recycling services existed. Were they drop off, were they curbside, and looking at potential materials that weren't currently being recovered, pulling all that data together and kind of painting a picture for us to determine if there, like we had been saying for so long, was our region really kind of ripe for enhancement. And fortunately, it did validate a lot of what we were saying, and it did point out that there's so much potential in this region and that we could do a lot better if we work together collaboratively. So that was exciting. It did validate a lot. And when that study was complete, RRS helped to present the findings to the community. And from my recollection, there were like probably 50 people from around the Tri-County area who attended a presentation of just kind of a review of the findings of this study. And these were folks like county commissioners and public works directors and us recycling people who kind of heard all of that and became very excited about what potential we had to enhance recycling in this region. And kind of at the end of that, we were like, this is great, but now what? And so what sprung out of that was this Capital Region Recycling Initiative, which was a committee of local stakeholders, kind of decision-making people, because we wanted to keep that momentum going. We wanted to keep that discussion going because we knew there was a lot of potential, but we didn't know what it would turn into. And so this group really met regularly to bring in as many surrounding communities as possible, trying to kind of get power in numbers. We wrote white papers, we drafted resolutions that several communities adopted. We set our goals, and we really tried to kind of frame what we wanted. And then you can forward that slide if you would, please. And then we got to the point when that group that we kind of said, again, now what? You know, we've done all this great work, now what? So one of our partnering agencies in Ingham County facilitated a request for information process for us. And I'm going to just pause for a moment to give a shout out to Eaton County, which I failed to do in my previous slide. Eaton County is the one who actually authored that CGAP grant I mentioned. I say that because I want to really frame this as a regional effort, which it was. So now Ingham County facilitated this request for information to us because we felt like we, at this point, needed some private sector input. We were a bunch of public sector people without the resources to do what we really wanted to do, and we knew we probably needed to partner with the private sector, and it was about time to hear from them. So we sent out this RFI and got several great responses from people and had the opportunity to sit down with them and hear from them about how they thought we could bring recycling to the next level in our region. And it was great to hear the excitement from that perspective, further validating that, you know, we really could do something great here. And once again, we, you know, at that point said, now what? So we hear from the private sector, there's interest, everybody wants to do great things. How are we going to make this happen? So we got to a point where, and this is, you know, fast forwarding it several years into 2017 now, where we realized that Lansing and East Lansing are kind of the two anchor communities in this region, being the kind of population hubs, we both had our own programs, collection, municipal crew programs, and we kind of had the numbers and the resources to take this to the next level. And we were ready at this point to send out an RFP. So Lansing authored an RFP with East Lansing signing up as our partner. And what we did was kind of dedicate our pooled together tonnage and kind of tried to paint a picture of all of this regional collaboration and show how many other communities surrounding us that were very interested in working together. And we crafted the RFP in such a way that kind of let folks know what we wanted to accomplish in the end, but left it open enough so that we could get some diverse proposals and really see what was going to be the best fit. And we did. We got a handful of really excellent proposals, and again, sat down with each company to discuss that. And I think it's worth saying that we had a really good panel representing folks from both Lansing and East Lansing, our purchasing agents and everything, to review these RFPs, and we unanimously agreed to select one proposal that was kind of our dream scenario, which was a private company that wanted to build a MRF in Lansing. So you can forward that. And many of you know that is Terra Environmental. And this proposal was chosen because they really, they had this shared vision. They saw what we saw. They saw that we had already worked together extensively to kind of gather a lot of that data and do a lot of the heavy lifting to get us to that point. I think they saw the value in that East Lansing and Lansing partnership, that pooling of tonnage. And so we were really excited at that point to choose them. So fast forward, and it's worth saying that, it's taken a very long time to find a site, but as you can see on this slide, we do have a location. If you're familiar with Lansing, it's on South Pennsylvania, very centrally located, perfect location for our operations. But it took a very long time to find a site. The better part of a year, I think, Terra took to find the right site. And every time we thought we had a site, it kind of got snatched up from us. And so what we're thrilled to say that we have a site, and Terra has been working on renovating that old industrial building that they have now for many, many months. They have equipment built in there. They're doing a lot of construction work. It's actually, you can forward that slide if you would please. It's actually due to open at the end of this month. So we could not be more thrilled after 6+ years of working towards this. It seems almost surreal that we're actually here. And we have a real desire to grow this and for it to be a regional MRF. And right now we're focused on just getting that facility open for business in a few short weeks so that we can start putting our materials through there. And start doing things more efficiently. And for us, it's saving on hauling costs instead of, putting materials on the road and shipping them to Detroit every day. This is going to be a significant savings for us. So we're pretty excited about that part of it too. And we're not going to stop there. We have a lot of dreams on the horizon. We know that we have to increase tonnage, and we think that the way to do that is through enhancing commercial and multifamily recycling. That's something that we've been talking about for a long time, and we'll really pursue now that the MRF is open. We have also been planning to incorporate an education center at this site. We've done a lot of fundraising for that already. We have a significant amount of funds already being held for that purpose. So we're pretty thrilled that people have wanted to invest in that. And we hope that that is kind of phase 2, so we can start really working on that after the site is open. And we've also talked about having a drop-off site, a high-tech drop-off site. This whole MRF is state-of-the-art, high-tech, and the drop-off site and education center will be no different. So we're really, really thrilled. And I think that's the end, Karen. I think that's yep. So I guess if I just were to leave you with a couple of thoughts, it would be collaborate, look outside of yourselves and see who in your region you can talk to, and really engage stakeholders and keep that discussion going. For us, I think that was critical. We did not kind of let that go after like a 6-year project. We just kept on pursuing it, and here we are. So with that, I will just say thank you so much for having me, and I'll stick around for any questions if you'd like.
Thank you so much, Lori. Appreciate your presentation. If I can just say 2 quick things. One is that having an education center in the capital region, I think is going to be really important for any policy initiatives we have, because, you know, legislators and decision makers really need to understand what this process is. And I will also say that the Michigan Recycling Coalition played a role in this project as well, as a fiduciary agent, and sometimes kind of providing expert information, and just being a part of a team to explore opportunities and pursue them. And we were happy to do that. And Lori's been a great leader. So thank you, Lori. So next up is Theo Egermont. Theo is fairly new to Washtenaw County. Theo, are you ready to take over here?
Yeah, I am. So as Karen said, my name is Theo Egermont. I came out of higher education, starting 2 sustainability departments in Minnesota before coming to Michigan for grad school. And I'm going to talk about our solid waste plan so far and what we've done with it. So next slide, an overview of our outcomes. The biggest thing our plan called for was the start of a regional authority. So up until last year, where we were the most dense part of the state by population density, without some kind of intergovernmental recycling agreement. So fortunately, we changed that. We're now the newest authority. Second, our plan called for the formation of an advisory and implementation committee. And then the third one, which is maybe less of an outcome, but more of a component. But the outcome is that we do have goals and guidance, which provides us the direction. When combined with some of the things like the EMMP, the mega data program by the state next cycle, may actually mean we achieve some of the progress towards our plan, which is a great thing. So I'm going to put in some shameless plugs here as I go along for some of the good things happening at the state and elsewhere. But first, I'll give a little bit of history and context. So our plan was opened up by Arbor Hills when they requested an expansion in 2015. And part of that agreement that we came to when working on that is they actually paid for our plan, which is why ours looked so nice. They repealed their request 1 or 2 years later, but the county continued on. We decided to forge ahead and keep our plan process going and update our plan, since the prior one was approved in 1999. So we had a long period of time without a plan. So our actual plan was approved in 2019 after some back and forth with the state on some language, and it takes a little time, as many of you know. Christina Miller at that point, I think, was a one-person shop, and so it's an extensive plan and a lot of work. So I'm excited about the 115 rewrites because it gives us more tools, and some parts are fast-tracked, and so we'll have fewer delays and more resources, which I'm excited about. So a little plug for the 115 rewrites in there too. So I'll move on to the regional authority that we've got up here. So the challenge that we had was we've got a lot of regional issues without some kind of regional arrangement. As plan development was going on, we became aware that we had a number of stakeholders that had the same type of issues. So people at the meetings were saying, you know, we've got these same things that are popping up for us as challenges for our municipalities. And the things that emerged many times were education and outreach was underfunded, not coordinated. We had some need for some infrastructure, both in drop-off station development as well as common collection and processing. And folks said, these are regional issues. We should be attacking this on a regional basis. So we spent over a year getting municipalities, and we included other stakeholders as well that couldn't necessarily be a part of the authority, like the universities, because that's the way the law is written. That allows you to form an authority, but we wanted to include them because they can be clients and we can operate with them if the structure makes that possible. So we spent a year getting that formed, and some of the bigger challenges where it seemed like we spent like 6 months defining if the landfill language would be explicit or inexplicit that we couldn't own land. But then ironically, it took us like 15 minutes to pass the language on voting that everyone agreed on that. And you'd think that would be one of the most contentious things. We did get a grant to form that authority. We got $40,000 from SEMCOG, which helped support that. And maybe one of the things that we found was after we formed the authority, or as we were forming the authority, Ann Arbor, which ironically was one of the folks who was the biggest proponents of forming the authority, when we brought it to their city council, they decided to table it. So we're still working to get the city of Ann Arbor to join that authority, and we're hoping that after this election cycle, we'll be able to get more support for Ann Arbor joining. But they went and forged ahead with creating a MRF and reached an agreement with Recycle Ann Arbor, a local recycling nonprofit here. So we also have some possibilities to interact with them through the authority. Let's see. And one of the things that the top priority that emerged from the authority once we formed was that we wanted to increase the quantity of high quality recyclables. And so that focuses on both quantity and quality, but it really focuses on, we want to have good stuff. We want to have our material that we send to a MRF be the good stuff, and we can increase the value of those commodities so that people want those, they're in demand. And it was really strategic when we applied for the Eagle and Recycling Partnership Grant, which we ended up winning, because education and outreach is something that's maybe a little bit less contentious than something like a MRF or a drop-off station. It's a good thing for us to get some buy-in from the many municipalities, and we're bringing in dollars. So municipalities are taking a chance or a gamble maybe on saying, well, there's something new, I'm going to join this authority. And then we're bringing back some real dollars and showing something for it through the recycling grant. So that grant is just what we needed as an authority. And then just taking a step back, looking at why this authority is a really good thing. When authorities first started, they were really focused on solid waste and specifically like landfills and hauling of trash. But now if you look at authorities, it's predominantly recycling and landfill diversion. And I think in 20, 40, 60 years, who knows, maybe some of the recycling challenges aren't as big of challenges. We've got more of this figured out, and maybe we end up being more zero waste oriented. So I see the authority as a long-term vehicle for achieving a lot of the goals that are part of the solid waste plan. So next slide. The next thing our plan called for is a plan implementation advisory committee. And the challenge here was an accountability mechanism and some kind of organizational capacity. So the plan called for an action committee, and previously we had a consortium as more of an informal group that got together to address recycling issues. But the goal here is to leverage outside assistance, branch out, not operate in a silo, and involve the public. And maybe a secondary goal is to reduce our public works meetings that we have for our other board, because we can spend a lot more time addressing specific issues through this committee. So right now we're, and I give you a little bit more of what this committee is about. They're charged with creating action plans, strategic thinking, evaluation, providing feedback and support. We started a sponsorship program where we support either businesses or organizations that are looking to reduce what's sent to a landfill or recycle or composting, many of the things that the MRC is working to support and we're supporting as a county that end up achieving the solid waste plan goals. So we're we're trying to leverage other organizations in order to meet the solid waste plan goals. And this committee acts as a review board for those proposals, and then sends them on to our Board of Public Works for final approval. So the thing that we're working on right now with this plan advisory committee is we're doing an evaluation. So we're looking at our programs, figuring out what we can improve, getting public support for those, and then actually implementing those changes. So that's really helpful for us to have that network feedback and support through another public body. And then this committee is actually going to be through the 115 rewrites, a standing committee that's for all counties. So it's something that we found really helpful. I hope that if 115 gets passed, which I hope it does, counties really leverage this body in order to advance their plan. So next slide. And then the next one is our goals. So the challenge that we've got is, what's your direction as a new manager? Looking at our solid waste plan, this wasn't something that sat on the shelf and I looked at every year. I'd regularly look back and say, well, what does the plan say about that? It gives us some good guidance for what do we prioritize. And it's helpful to have something that's been approved by the public, municipalities, our Board of Public Works, County Board of Commissioners. It's got wide scale buy-in. And specifically it provides targets in the direction of zero waste, which is, as I mentioned, a challenge. I think we tend to focus a lot more on recycling and diversion. We don't think about how can we stop stuff from getting created in the first place. And when I was looking at, we just moved our offices and I was looking at the old solid waste plans. And the most recent one before our plan was 1999. And it has the same goals of increasing to 38% from 5 years of the start of the plan. So we moved ahead about 20 years, but we have the same goals. And to me, that says, it proves the axiom, you can't improve what you can't measure. And so that's why the mega data project by the state is so important and why I'm looking forward to looking at those results, getting some specific data that's not necessarily all based on EPA estimates or something, but getting some more hard data that we can back up and then collect that regularly and improve it. So another shameless plug. It provides some limits on data and education and says, here's some of the problems that you're facing and some of the challenges that you're going to look at, and here's where you can go to actually get some support for that. And then let's see, the last problem that I think we've got is disposal is really cheap, and that's something that we're going to have to steadily work on, because unless we reach some kind of parity with the cost for landfilling, with recycling, we're going to continue fighting an uphill battle. So I think that's our biggest challenge that we're going to face, and looking for those goals to provide some guidance on that. So with that, thanks.
Thank you, Theo. Really great presentation. And I think it's very interesting. You're fairly new to this particular world, but you are working on the forefront of what is coming next, I think, for all of us. So thanks for the shameless plug about the things that we continue to work on at the state level, because it is going to be the vehicle for all of us to move forward, truly. So thanks for your work. Appreciate that. All right. And next up is Catherine Tesson. She manages the Mid-Michigan Waste Authority. Are you ready, Catherine? You need to unmute yourself if you are muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right. Good morning. Thank you, Kieran, for having me be part of this presentation. We are having internet difficulties in our area. We have high-level internet. We have very low-tier internet, so just kind of bear with me. I started with the authority in 2013 and became the administrative director in the fall of 2015. So from the first slide, this is who we are. The Mid-Michigan Waste Authority was founded in 1991 by some municipal managers and DPW supervisors interested in working collectively on residential curbside collection services for trash, recycling, and yard waste. The driving force was the principle of economies of scale, meaning that a group of 20,000 residents or customers can get a better price on a wider array of services than multiple smaller groups working independently. And over time, the authority has grown to 34 member communities encompassing almost all of Saginaw County and 3 municipalities in Gratiot County. So we're about 70,000 households or about 200,000 residents. And at the authority, we also have a seasonal HSW program, mostly funded through Saginaw County through tipping fees from the landfill. So we're urban, suburban, and rural. Our communities range in size from 300 households to 19,000 households, and the vast majority of our member communities are under 5,000 households. Each member community has a trustee and an alternate appointed to a 4-year term by its own governing body, and member contracts run the length of the current set of service agreements. So next slide, please.
Oops.
In 2019, MMWA member communities had a very specific decision to make. And the decision was, did that community want to continue to provide residential curbside collection services to its residents in 2020, 2021, and 2022? And why did we have to make that decision? So a little bit of background. MMWA's member current long-term collection contract, which runs from 2016 through 2022, was negotiated over the course of 2014 and well into 2015. This was part of that period of time where the volatility of recycling markets was having a visible and tangible impact on programs. Recycling profit-sharing revenue, which for many years helped to underwrite the entire curbside program, had declined, and providing curbside recycling was becoming not just a cost, but a cost that was going up and up, and an increasing cost that could clearly be seen on our monthly member bills. And during that same time, in 2014 and 2015, our recycling processing contract was also being renegotiated. So between the collection contract being negotiated, the processing contract being negotiated, all the parties involved recognized that we had to have flexibility. So what had been a long-term recycling processing agreement became a 2-year agreement with the option for 10 one-year extensions. So that flexibility is important to note as we talk about what eventually happened in 2019. So now we're back to the trapdoor. And recognizing that there was this volatility, our collection vendor, Waste Management, agreed to have 2 instances over the course of a 7-year contract where each individual member of the authority could decide for itself whether or not it wanted to continue with residential curbside recycling. And they could drop out with no penalty, and the entire population of the authority, all 69,000 households, could drop out of residential curbside recycling collection with no penalty. So the first trapdoor was set to be implemented in 2017, and that just really didn't have any issues. We had an education piece, we talked costs, we had focus groups, but everybody decided to stay in. It didn't have any sense of urgency. It went very smoothly. But as we looked at the trapdoor that would become effective in 2020, we knew that we had a whole different set of issues. Next slide, please. So what we knew we had to do was understand what our timeline was. And we had some tools that we could use in terms of our executive committee and our board of trustees. So we had already laid some groundwork with our trustees and our residents and starting to get people to use the same language and have it mean the same thing. And that's, a little bit about what we did with contamination. And one of the tools that we have is we have board meetings every other month, and they're usually pretty well attended. And we have a pretty dedicated 9-member executive committee that meets every other month. And they had very robust discussions about the increasing cost of recycling processing and what they expect for their residents and what is the right thing to do. And we also had laid some groundwork by talking to our member communities each year about their own annual budget, because that budget gets approved each October. so people could see how recyclables collection and processing and the amount that it took up of their annual refuse assessment and how that was going up. And in addition, in terms of establishing common language, MMWA had gotten an EAGLE grant of the year before to do a pilot program dealing with contamination. And we worked with waste management and targeted a variety of routes, and we had an OOPS sticker and a Your Recycling Star sticker. And so that language about contamination was out there. So we had already started to lay the groundwork with the executive committee, the board of trustees, and with some of our residents about this language that they would be hearing about increasing costs and about contamination. Which takes us to now the beginning of the beginning. We had this timeline that we knew we needed to work backwards. Each member community needed to make a decision in time for that member community to vote on that decision in their regular October 2019 meeting so that our publication requirements could be met. So we knew that whatever it was that we were going to do, the Board of Trustees had to vote on it before the end of September. And so moving backwards from that, that established our timeline. So we started working on this in 2018 and in late 2018 and early 2019. And we knew that we had to determine what options were available to us in terms of processing and cost. And we also knew that we were probably unlikely to get the information that we needed and that the program was probably going to end. And we started having those very blunt conversations in late 2018 and in early 2019. That language was being used and people were starting to think about what impact is that going to have on my community and how our residents are going to start acting and reacting. Because what we fundamentally knew was we were unlikely to get a deal where we could know what all the costs were going to be. So that sort of like pushed a lot of our activity and formed a lot of our activity. So one of the things that we decided to do was continue educating our residents and continue with this idea of using all of the same language. Nope, go back one, please. Okay. So in late 2018, I reached out to Karen to see if she could come and talk to our trustees at a Board of Trustees meeting. And through Karen, she helped me get together with Matt and have Matt Flechter come and speak to that same meeting. And we had a representative from Waste Management and a representative from Republic Services. So we were able to present to our member trustees a panel of experts who could talk about their vision of recycling going forward and language around contamination. And Karen did a great job, Matt did a great job, they created a lot of enthusiasm, they were great about answering everybody's questions. And so when people left that meeting, they had additional information in language that they already understood, and they had a better understanding of what recycling markets looked like going forward. So they did a great job, and we were really happy to have them. So now the next slide. And from there, because that was supposed to happen in February, and we had a huge blizzard, and so it actually happened in April. So keep in mind, our time frame is contracting and contracting and contracting, because here we are in the beginning of April, and we know we have to vote at the end of September. And one of the things that we wanted to do was establish a baseline with our residents so that they knew what the problem was, so that if the program went away, we had communicated in some way with them that there was an issue with the curbside recycling program and that the costs were escalating. So this flyer that you're seeing was developed, and the idea was, what do I need to know and what can I do? So what do I need to do and what can I do? And we talked about contamination, and we recognized that this wasn't actually going to solve the contamination problem at the curb. That required many, many, many more steps, but this was our baseline. And we started getting people talking, and each member community could decide whether or not they wanted to send it out. At the same time, we were soliciting bids for a 3-year processing contract. But again, we wanted something that wasn't really possible because there was too much unknowable about the recycling markets, and this risk could not be defined into a fixed dollar amount. And we were doing additional background work by giving residents all kinds of historical data about their costs. So next slide, please. So we got a bid from Waste Management. We did not get a bid from Republic until after the deadline. Both of those bids put all of the risk on the authority, which is understandable, but it wasn't going to be something that worked. There were, essentially the bid said, and ultimately we can pass on any costs that come up unexpectedly dollar to dollar to you, but you won't know until after that month passes, which is completely understandable, but not a business proposition that you can take on. Next slide, please. So then what happened? Then, oh, you gave away the punchline. Then what happened? Well, I knew Tim from Bay City from our regional MRC meetings, and the folks from Bay City and the folks from Midland, we'd all been talking about, you know, what opportunities do we have to work together? You can go up one. Nope. There you go. And Tim knew a guy in Traverse City at American Waste, and Tim gave me his contact info, and I reached out, and I was in the car a week later, headed to Traverse City, and I went to the American Waste facility, and I had a great tour, and I got a great presentation from Deb Lake, and I came back, and I was really enthusiastic, and I thought, we have a potential deal here. And I talked to our chairman about it, and I was raving about this presentation. And I said, you know, if you could just see it, see what I saw. And so we agreed that we would have Deb Lake come down and do the presentation at our executive committee meeting. And she did, and we had 9 people crowded on one side of a not very big conference room, watching a very good PowerPoint presentation on a wall in a room that we couldn't make dark. It was kind of one of those things where it's funny when it happens, but man, it was so effective. And so the members of the executive committee came out of that presentation having thought the program was going to end to now thinking, I have so many of my questions answered. I feel so much better about this. This is a deal that we can do. Let's see if we can figure out how to make this happen. And she needs to come back and present it at a special call board meeting. And she did. And every trustee that walked into that special call board meeting had decided to discontinue the program for their member community. Every single one, including our biggest member communities. And after that presentation, they all walked out convinced that they should continue with curbside recycling. That's how powerful that presentation was. So next, the individual governing bodies needed to be convinced. And that's where it got a little bit more interesting. Our trustees are a diverse group in that we have people who are village managers, township managers, DPW managers. Some are elected to their governing body, and they can come from very, very small communities, and they can come from large communities. And so there's a wide array of people with knowledge and skills and the time to devote to being a trustee. And I started getting calls with questions, which made me realize that we hadn't been communicating as clearly as we thought we had, and that some member communities could do with a lot more support. And I started going to municipal meetings. And from some of the glazed looks I was getting, I started to realize I needed something else, a hook, you know, some pizzazz. People learn differently. And just like what worked for the executive committee and for the trustees were visual aids, I started taking visual aids. So you can see that large garbage truck. And I would go to a meeting and I would hold up that large garbage truck and I would say, this is a fixed cost. If you continue recycling, you have to pay this fixed cost for 3 years. And then I would hold up the tiny truck and I would say, this is the truck that takes the recycling from Saginaw to Traverse City, and this is how much it's going to cost, and this is why part of it is fixed and part of it is variable. And then I would hold up the recycling bin and I would talk about how part of that cost was fixed and how part of that was variable. And then I would talk about the overall cost and the overall cost for 2021 and 2022. And then I would take as many questions as they had. And there was one meeting where I took questions for an hour. And at the end of it, next slide, please. 33 out of 34 MMWA communities continued with residential curbside recycling collection, which was, considering we started in late 2018 and really had the push beginning in April of 2019 and closed the deal the October. It was a very good result that we were all very proud of, but man, when we started out, we sure didn't think that that was what was going to happen. Next slide, please. So for us, one of the big takeaways was start the education plan as soon as possible. And I want to give a real shout out to something that I learned at the MRC conference in 2018 that obviously really stuck with me. I attended a session that was led by Jeff McKean of SACRA and Anna Leinot, and if I pronounced your name wrong, I'm sorry, of RRS, that was about program improvements at SACRA, about converting from a dual stream MRF to a single stream MRF and distributing toter carts to 100,000 residents. And at the end of the presentation, I asked Jeff and Anna, you know, what's the one thing that you learned? What's the one thing that if you could do it differently, you know, or do it all over again, that you would do differently? And the first thing Jeff said was more time on education. And so as I was going through this process, I was hearing that language the entire way through. And boy, they were right. And so my biggest takeaway as we go into negotiating our next set of long-term contracts, which we're going to start next year, is more education earlier. What I'm taking away from my own experience was go to municipal meetings again and go again and go again. And then thirdly, embrace your visual aids. It was so unexpected to me what an impact having visual aids had. So that's my presentation.
Catherine Tesson, thank you so much. I apologize. I blew it for you because I think that that story is one of the best ones I've heard. I mean, that is a significant lift with all of the challenges that we've had over the past few years. It just shows that there is a commitment to do the right thing and to begin to create that circular economy. I regret to inform you all that we don't have time for the questions. I know we have questions in the chat, and so we are going to do our best to facilitate getting those questions answered for people. But now it is time to shut down this Zoom, go to your next link and pull that up. You'll be put in a waiting room, and then when we're ready, we'll start the next presentation. So please join us for that, and we'll see you in just a minute.